Hi everyone, welcome to Yachting International Radio. Today I have Mike with us, and Mike is the caretaker and founder of Dharmaholic. And we're going to get into that because he's got such an interesting background, and where he's arrived today is based on his life experience. So we're going to talk a bit about alcohol abuse and recovery. So Mike, welcome to the interview. It's so good to have you here.
Thanks, Karine. I'm so pleased to be here.
So can you tell me, I know a bit about you, but your first interaction, I don't know if that's a good word to use, or introduction, I would say, to alcohol use, when was that?
Well, my dad was a big drinker, and when I started to encounter those adolescent problems that everyone goes through, the natural solution to a lot of my emotional shit was to start drinking quite heavily. At first, I thought it was just a fun thing to do, but the effect that it had on me just lit me up like a Christmas tree, and I just wanted more and more and more. So I kept on looking for more for the next 30 years, and I went through marriages and children and business failures, and I went through, all of life's battles very, very unsuccessfully because I drank almost every day. And in the last 10, 15 years, I drank to unconsciousness just about every day.
Wow.
So when I was nearly dead at the age of 42, my girlfriend suggested I go to AA, and I didn't want to. And I did a bit of research because I'm a very clever man. I thought, oh, I don't need to go to AA. And I went along. It didn't work for me. Then it did. And I haven't had a drink for 12 years.
Gosh, amazing. Congratulations.
That's the 25 words or less story.
Yeah, wow. So as you know, I've worked with the prison population, and there's a lot of drug and alcohol abuse, and their upbringing is, I guess, from their parents as well, like learned behavior. So the parents drank to cope, and that's all they knew. And so that's their way of coping too, as a result of learning what their parents did. And even the story, one of them said that he was about 12 years of age, and the parents were using heroin, and they were getting him out on the streets to steal so that he could fund his parents' habits. And then the parents said, let me inject you because this is how good it feels. And he was only 12 years of age. And for those who maybe grow up in those environments, how does a child, what assistance can we give to children to get out of that toxic environment?
Well, first of all, I really can identify with the 12-year-old that's been injected by his parents, even though that's not my story. But the parents wanted that child to have some sort of relief and some sort of excitement or some sort of experience. And in their addicted manner, they didn't know much better than to inject their 12-year-old child. That was not my story. My mum and dad stayed together for 52 years, and except for the fact that my father was a very, very heavy drinker, I don't identify with the heroin usage at all. But I think alcohol in our society is such a widespread issue, and there's a lot of heavy drinking that is not alcoholic, and then there's a lot of alcoholic behaviour that most people will identify with the people who they see sleeping in parks and are at death's door virtually. And then there's an awful lot of alcoholism that's hidden from the public eye, and people will only encounter that in very, very intimate conversations with close friends. Since I've been sober, I've come across, I'm very open about my alcoholism. I don't have any shame about it, and I think that's been a really great thing for me. But when I tell people that I'm an alcoholic and I haven't had a drink for so many years, they will almost always say, oh, I've got a cousin who's like that. I have a sister who drinks too much. My father was an alcoholic. My granddad was an alcoholic, or my grandmother was an alcoholic. Alcoholism touches so many people's lives. And unfortunately, it's not openly spoken about very often, because we as Australians, and perhaps most people in the Western world, rely very heavily on alcohol on a daily basis just to get through that that horrible feeling that we have at the end of the day. Did I
Mm.
answer your question?
Yeah, I think it's essentially, it has a lot to do with culture
Yeah.
and the drinking culture. It's okay to drink, you know, like it's fun, it's entertainment, it's part of lifestyle, and it's maybe sending a wrong message, especially for those who are not perhaps self-aware or have an indication of, you know, why do they drink? Is it purely for entertainment, or is it self-medication? Is there something else going on that you can't cope with right now? And obviously through life experience, you have found some helpful and healthy coping strategies. But for those who don't have any awareness around the reasons why they drink, I think they could end up in trouble.
Alcohol in our society is a social lubricant. It helps us talk to each other. It takes the edge off after a hard day, or it helps us celebrate great moments like birthdays and Christmas and Father's Day and Mother's Day. They're all the good uses of alcohol, but there's a point where a lot of people, and it's been estimated that 10% of us are alcoholics or drug addicts in some sort of respects. But alcohol and drug use is only one avenue, if you like, of escapism. So the Buddha talked in terms that all of life is suffering, and suffering is caused by craving. And what I like to address is the fact that all of us want something, and we want it so bad that when we don't get it, we seek escape in something else. And it might be sex, it might be substance abuse, it might be shopping, it could be a whole number of things that we do on a daily basis to get away from our suffering. And it wasn't until I could address my suffering and then realize that if I just got rid of the craving, or the need to escape, if you like, then I could live with my pain and with my fellow men and women in a society, in a community. Before that, it was just me against the world. And what I did to avoid that was to drink lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of alcohol.
Mm. And that's also the cycle of addiction. And you spoke about now you don't have that shame and that guilt, which a lot of people do, and they drink more to suppress the shame and guilt for past behaviors. And it's so difficult to get out of that cycle without working on yourself and understanding your behaviors and self-compassion and self-love and all of that. And it takes hard work. It's not an easy fix. And drinking alcohol is an easy fix. It's immediate relief. But going back to your 15-year-old self, what do you think, and talking about suffering, what do you think your 15-year-old self needed?
I'm a very sensitive person,
Mm.
and I think it's been identified that drug addicts are very sensitive, that you'll find them in the arts a lot, because artistic expression is also something that sensitive people do. But
Mm.
unfortunately, the downside of artistic expression or sensitivity is a need to escape, like I have. And
Mm.
when I found that first buzz from drinking, and I wanted it more and more and more, um, it became a pattern, and then it became an addiction.
Mm.
And for the last 10 years, from about the ages of 33 to 45, I woke up every morning and got a drink.
Mm.
And I needed towards the last 5 years, I needed three 15-ounce glasses of wine from a cask, just so that I could brush my teeth. You know, I was always
Mm.
um, throwing up in the morning, trying to force alcohol down, throwing up, forcing it down, and then finally, after the third glass, I could walk out of the bathroom and get about my business.
Mm.
So I think that addiction itself, the 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 way that it evolves in individual is quite different. I've
Mm.
heard a lot of stories over the 15 years that I've been in AA, and I've gone to NA meetings, I've gone to adult children of alcoholics meetings, I've heard lots and lots of stories, and they're not always the same, but they follow a similar pattern.
So can you tell me about that pattern?
Well, I'm not a medical professional or a psychologist in that, but I have spoken. Like, I went to a psychologist every month for 9 years, and in that time she got a PhD and I got sober, so it worked out both. It
Yeah.
worked out well for both of us.
Yes.
So I can only really relate from what I've read and what I've experienced, and the pattern is more or less that we drink to escape. The drinking or the drug addiction takes a physical scenario, and then we have to have more and more just to survive. Now, there's been a lot of different methods of recovery, and some of them don't involve abstinence, but I am very much on the side that abstinence is imperative before any sort of recovery can happen. And the abstinence from our drug of choice is very, very difficult, and that's why rehabs are so important. I didn't go to a rehab. I went to a detox, and it didn't work for me. I went straight out from the detox and went straight into a pub. But I think abstinence is the first step, and then the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous takes you through a program of recovery that fixes the original problem.
Okay, that makes sense. So in terms of in our industry, drug and alcohol use is quite common in the super yacht industry. So I know with the Australian standards or recommended units of alcohol a week, am I correct in saying it's about 10?
I remember when I was 22 and I thought I could never drink 22 drinks a week. That's ridiculous. I have 22 in a day. But it may have come down to around 10, yeah. And I think if you, no, what I was going to say was a medical opinion, and I'll try to refrain from that because I'm not a doctor.
Yes. Okay. Because I'm just curious to know what would be a recommended amount for those who do drink so that you can sort of get a gauge of where, I know like I administer some tests with regards to that, but just to get an indication of what's a healthy amount and what's not. But you're saying that you'd rather not talk about that because, yeah.
Absolutely. You know, my partner, Heather, she would drink far less than me on a yearly, monthly and weekly basis. In fact, I would probably drink more in one day than she would drink in a week if we were both drinking. And I recently buried a friend of mine, and he was sober for quite some years and went back, and every day, if he touched a drop of alcohol, it would end up in heroin use, and that's just not my story, you know.
So, in terms of the impact that alcohol has had on your life, can you tell me a little bit more about that? You mentioned broken marriages, the suffering. You've got children. Like, how has that impacted your life? The alcohol abuse.
Well, the fact that I got married at 17 was probably a consequence of alcohol. So when I began drinking in my mid-teens, it was a social lubricant, but I found that it was I was always the most drunk person at the end of a teenage party, and you just don't know what you're going to do next. In my case, I also felt an awful lot of shame, remorse, and guilt about my drinking. And even though I didn't know that I was going through this process at the time, when my girlfriend got pregnant and we were discussing what to do next, I thought that the next thing to do would be to get married and to raise our child. Now, I don't want to get into a theological debate, but I think that a lot of that was a consequence of poor thinking, and we call it alcoholic thinking. It's not something that we can discuss over this conversation, but that marriage didn't last very long because of my alcoholism. So I got married because I'm an alcoholic. I got divorced because I was an alcoholic. I raised my children as an alcoholic, and I have a lot of guilt, remorse, and pain about that I've had to work through.
Yes.
And then I followed that cycle over and over again. I got another girlfriend, and she got pregnant, and and I've got other children, and at the age of 30, I was looking after 5 children, and I was running a real estate agency that I'd started my own. So all of that was craziness, and was all done because there was something fundamentally wrong with my reasoning, and I call it alcoholism.
Yeah, and I mean, it can quickly escalate to a downward spiral for sure.
Well, when my real estate agency failed because of my alcoholism, I then really got stuck into the drink. So over 15 years, between 15 and 30, I've made an awful lot of poor decisions. The alcohol intake got steadily worse until the point where I was a complete failure in business and life. So I just drank for the next 10 years. So all I'm trying to describe, Karine, is that alcohol exacerbated my problems, and then it became my problem. And it wasn't until I could abstain long enough to get some sort of spiritual growth, and then mend my thinking and my feeling and my mode of operandi, if you like. I was able to get out of that cycle. All right then.
So, Mike, can you tell me a little bit more about when you recognized that it was time to make a change, and what did your journey look like, your healing journey look like, and what is your quality of life now compared to what it was before, by, doing whatever you could to abstain and take care of yourself?
At the age of 42, my family doctor told me that after he'd done a series of liver function tests, that he'd never seen a liver in a living human being like mine. So in his opinion, I should have been dead by then. I was seeing a girl who had some recovery prior to us meeting. She was drinking when I met her. I met her in a bar. And she convinced me to go to AA, and for the next 2.5 years, I struggled. And my father died, and my best friend died, and I was in and out of the rooms of AA. And then one day, almost like a serendipitous happenstance, I call it, or a miracle, I went to my doctor and I got some Valium for the delirium tremens that I always suffer when I give up the booze. He gave me a script and I got it filled, and I took a Valium and I went to an AA meeting. And from that day, it was March the 8th, from that day onward, a series of events happened, and I started studying Buddhism for the first time. And I haven't had a drink since. So the combination for me was complete desperation, near-death experience, and then some sort of spark of enlightenment that happened. I instantly threw myself into both AA meetings and Buddhist classes, and my quality of life has just blossomed, not because of my external circumstances, but because of my heart and my mind being in alignment, if you like.
Yes.
So now my thinking doesn't send me crazy all the time, and my heart is not full of sorrow and emptiness. It's quite full of love and happiness. During my early recovery, my father had died, as I said, but my mum got Alzheimer's disease, and I was living with her. She was my carer at the beginning of the journey, and then I became her carer. She's now passed away as well. But we sort of had this ridiculous relationship where I was getting better and she was getting worse, and eventually she needed to go into a home and she passed away. But over the last 12 years, I've just had this easing of problems. Every day I encounter obstacles that I can easily overcome. And with that comes greater self-confidence, self-esteem, self-worth, which I was severely lacking in, and was probably my original problem, which was a lack of self-worth and self-esteem.
Mm.
Um, as I said, I was with a psychologist for many years. I was on antidepressants for 15 years. I was diagnosed with bipolar, which explains why some days I get so much done and some days I just can't get out of my own way. But
Yeah.
despite the fact that my psychological problems haven't been completely erased, I live a great and fulfilling life now.
Mm.
Um, you probably can see from behind me, I live in a caravan now, and that just suits me fine because I have freedom and I have everything I need around me, and yeah, I'm living the dream.
Wow, I'm so happy for you. So I can feel, your sense of life fulfillment, and that's
Yeah,
just so beautiful. And I know a lot of people are searching for that, and that fact that you have found it is pretty incredible.
yeah.
Um, I did have another question for you that came to mind when you were talking, so hopefully it will come back. But maybe in the meantime, you can tell me about your business and why you call yourself a caretaker. So yeah, what does your business do? How do you serve?
It's very embryonic, Karine. It's taken me 2 years of writing and recording to get to where I am now. And Dharmaholic is the name of the website, dharmaholic.com. And what I hope to achieve is to share the experiences that I've had and the knowledge that I've garnered from other sources to help people be happy in sobriety. I believe that there are great resources for people who are struggling with alcohol and drug addiction now to get sober. But what I've witnessed is that there's a lot of people who are sober that are very, very, very unhappy still. And perhaps some of the techniques, tips, tricks, um, the things that I've learned both from the rooms and from my Dharma classes, that perhaps we can put together a program of action that is very, very efficacious in helping people get happiness into their lives on a regular basis. Not just peaks and troughs, but a regular, low level continuum of happiness.
Mhm. And what makes you happy, Mark?
I don't think anything outside. I'm trying to avoid allowing other things or people to make me happy.
Uh-huh.
Um, what makes me happy is a gratitude list in the morning.
Perfect.
um,
Yeah.
you know, if I can use the tools that I've learned from the beautiful people that I've come in contact with over the last 15 years, if I can implement them in my life, I find that I'm very, very happy. Like last week, I spent a little bit of time walking in rainforest in southeast Queensland,
Mm.
and a small mammal, I don't know what it was, I think it was a wallaby, came jumping towards us, and we saw some beautiful birds, and you could smell the freshness in the trees. For an alcoholic who couldn't get out of his own way for 30 years, just the beauty of walking in nature is just a fantastic thing. So
Mm.
that's one of the things that I think makes me happy. But
Y-
it's my happiness that allows that to manifest.
Yes, I understand.
Yeah.
And you mentioned seeing a psychologist for a number of years. How was that helpful to you?
Well, I guess her technique was basically CBT, cognitive behavior therapy, and there are completely so many different techniques, I'm sure, in the world of psychology that would help a struggling addict to pull apart their shitty past and to work on problematic relationships. In my case, I had a lot of pain around my dad.
Mm.
I felt like I was expected to be something that I was not, and he kept on hiding his feelings in alcohol, which then taught me a pattern of behaviour which became detrimental to my life.
Mm.
But other people have got different stories, Karine, and for me, therapy was a really important part of my early progress.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Ironically, my psychologist did her thesis in anger and resentment, and she got her PhD that way. So I feel like I was responsible for her getting her PhD.
Well, I'm sure you brought a lot of value and insight, because as therapists, we learn so much through our clients as well. And it's so
Yeah,
lovely that there was a value exchange in that relationship, that therapeutic relationship you had with her.
absolutely.
So, yeah, another thing is what I've noticed and what we had to deal with in prison. And it was multi-layered in prison because you had to be tough in jail. And it's the same. I worked with the male population, and it's the old school mentality of harden the F up. Showing your emotions is a sign of weakness. I'm not too sure if your father had the same sentiments, but I'm wondering, in your circle of friends who are or have engaged in that pathway of recovery, how difficult is it for a man to ask for help and get support?
That's such an amazing question. My father's favorite actor was John Wayne. And I believe that in American psychological circles, there's a thing called John Wayneism. And I don't know if you're aware of it. It's not very common here. Not many people have heard of it. But I think that that tough exterior that men, especially since World War II, seem to have tried to perpetuate as a father-son rite of passage was detrimental to me, because I think my father and I were very similar. He's a sensitive man and I'm a sensitive man. He showed me how to deal with his sensitivity by drinking copious amounts of alcohol and being quite misogynistic to his wife. That's something that I didn't want to utilize or perpetuate in my life. And I struggled with that, um, becoming a man and not wanting to become my father, but loving him so much, and all of those complicated emotions. And it's only now I did a men's rite of passage last month, which was very, very beneficial for me, because I started to feel those feelings that I've been hiding all my life. And
Mm,
I had a lot of empathy and a lot of compassion for my dad. And it's really helped me again, another layer of recovery. And I've
mm.
forgotten your question now. I feel like I'm rambling.
No, you're not rambling. You're not at all. I can so relate to what you're saying, and that's why, you know, I when you mentioned empathy and compassion, and that's what I felt for the men that I worked with in the justice system. And I feel so privileged that they felt comfortable enough to open up and expose their wounds and feel emotions in a room together. And for me, that was so powerful. It was so beautiful. And you see a different side. It's humanity. We're human beings at the end of the day. We're not perfect. And some of us have, traveled different roads. But at the end of the day, we can all come together, and we can reach out, we can support one another. We don't have to do this journey alone, because it can be so painful when we do. It's okay to ask for help. And yeah, I think just vocalizing it, and especially using this platform to speak up about it, people will identify with it and they won't feel as alone. And as I said, the journey is a lot harder alone rather than asking for help.
Well, I think what I heard you say, and something that is close to my heart, is Buddha's teachings about loving kindness,
Mm,
compassion,
mm,
moral discipline, and wisdom.
mm,
Moral discipline's got a lot of connotations, because everyone has different morality. But I didn't have any moral compass really when I was drinking. It was only when I was able to abstain from my drug of choice and start to move along a spiritual path that I started to realize that I wasn't living by my morals or anyone else's morals. So now that I've been able to get some distance between me and my last drink, and I can start moving towards a spiritual fulfillment of who I want to be, I'll be able to take some, Buddhist vows, like I don't eat meat, and I don't
mm,
kill, and I don't lie, and I don't steal, and you know what I mean. I'm living according to my moral compass now.
mm,
Uh, Now, a man in jail who has perhaps got there because of some violent act is probably a victim of his own lack of moral compass.
Mm.
And it's I don't want to philosophize on the state of our criminal justice system, but
Mm.
it's almost like our society has said, you know, you need to be put away into the naughty room now for a little while because you're not behaving properly. Now, the reason that they're not behaving properly is because they're hurt, they're suffering.
Yes, 100% right.
Yeah,
Honey, you've hit the nail on the head. And that's why I eventually had to leave, because I didn't feel supported, and I
yeah,
could see the amount of work that needed to be done. And I remember one of the participants, he, for some reason, missed one of the group sessions, and he wrote a letter and he said, please, will you let me come back? Like, this means the world to me. I finally feel understood. I don't feel alone, and I can see hope. And it's such a beautiful thing, but it's just the system confirms their beliefs about themselves. And as you said, coming from a place of low self-worth or self-esteem, it's just highlighting the fact that you are not deserving and you're a bad person, therefore you need to be punished. You will get no support, and all they need
yeah,
is support.
yeah.
Mm. Mm. So Mike, how can we find you? You mentioned your website. Is that your go-to place for people to reach out?
Yes, it's a bit of a dog's breakfast because I designed it myself. But it's called dharmaholic.com. And in the month of October, I'll be opening it up to a membership sort of arrangement where people can pay a subscription fee, and we'll work together as a group on a monthly basis. So
Wow, that's
that's
brilliant.
where all my writings and videos and recordings are going to happen. And I've had a podcast over the last year. There's only been 4 episodes released. It's called Happy, Sober, and Frickin' Awesome, and I hope
Yeah.
to pick up that again in the next month as well.
Oh, brilliant. I love the sound of
Yeah.
that. Amazing. Mike, you're a magnificent man, and thank you so much for sharing your time and your wisdom with us. I'm just wondering if you've got a quote or a couple of last words you'd like to say before ending this interview.
It's just been an absolute delight, Karine. I don't have any droplets of wisdom that I can bestow upon your audience, but I really want to thank you very much. And I know that the next 12 months is going to be exciting for you as well. So all the best with your venture.
Thank you so much, Mike, and take care.